So we developed MongoCrypt, a hosted, secure, encrypted database as a service. So the problem that we're trying to solve is that encryption is really hard. It's hard to get it right. So a lot of people just don't do it. Now in some industries they're forced to do it, like when you're encrypting credit cards or health data. But in other industries like social networks or games where you have some sensitive information about people, developers oftentimes they skip encryptions. They don't bother with it. At the same time, we've noticed some upward trends in our industry. We're having so many more healthcare startups, like life tracking apps, mood tracking apps, things like that. And everyone's moving to the cloud as well. At the same time, we're seeing an increase in hacking attempts. In fact, 2011 has been called the year of the hack. Did you know that NASA was hacked 13 times in 2011? It's a little scary. So we're targeting specifically, our target market is application developers. And we're looking at a type of database called a document database, a document store. And the specific one we're looking at is MongoDB. And we've noticed that in the way that it's traditionally deployed in the cloud, there's three specific threats that we want to target. The first is when the application is talking to the database, it's oftentimes sending information in plain text over the network. The second is that the text that's stored in the database itself is oftentimes stored unencrypted. And then because this database is useful for scaling, when you have different nodes in a cluster speaking to each other, they're also not talking in an encrypted way. Our solution is to plug these threats and offer it as a turnkey solution. So for communication along the network, we're providing secure sockets. And for the data that we store directly in the database, we're encrypting the keys and the values that are stored in such a way that you can still search the database, but as soon as the information leaves the application, it's encrypted. Now the specific workflow that we intend to make this easy is that we're targeting initially applications that are developed and deployed using the Heroku cloud platform as a service. So when someone's searching for a database to use on Heroku, they'll see, and they know they want to use Mongo, they will see a few options. And one of them is called MongoCrypt, which gives a pretty clear representation that it'll be encrypted. They click on that database, and they're given some configuration parameters, including the users that they're allowing to access the database. And this is also the screen where they can see some of the statistics about their database. And then they simply use it. They drop it into their code. And this is just some Ruby code that shows how to integrate it. Now, in terms of our market research, we know developers want this because we've looked through some forum postings that have shown developers saying, hey, why can't I encrypt things with Mongo? We have a few quotes that I'm actually going to skip over in the interest of time. But there's this particular ticket open on MongoDB's user list that's worth reading. And we also see a few questions on a popular Q&A site for developers. Now, in terms of the competition, there are a few competitors that we're looking at. They're not offering the same type of solution that we're offering. We're trying to make the data in the cloud secure, whereas the competitors either aren't worried about security or offering more consulting services. We worked out a financial model. I can come back to this if it's relevant. And here's that nice hockey stick graph that we were all asked to develop for this. So our next steps are we want to finish the development and perform a security audit, and then launch this in a few marketplaces. Thank you.
if the focus is right, so are you offering MongoDB encryption, or is it encryption more broadly general? So, you're not too concerned about the database offering, but if they want to encrypt any kind of service, you can offer an encryption layer to a database service of choice.
So the larger model is to go that route. When we were doing the market research, we actually found that there are other databases that would give us more return on investments than Mongo. But for this weekend, we decided we were going to tackle Mongo first because some of the properties of how it stores its documents make it more desirable as a developer to encrypt towards it. So that will be our first offering, and we've developed some open source tools that we're contributing to the community to aid in that effort.
And just one more, if you let me indulge. So you showed some screenshots of code, and you showed an interface like you can add a widget. How far have you built in terms of that?
Sure. So in terms of the page itself, we have our landing page up. We're integrated into the Heroku marketplace right now as an alpha stage add-on. So we have that integration done. In terms of the encryption layer, we don't have that completed. We have it's probably about 30 or 40% complete. And in terms of the SSL layer, we were about 80% complete.
And what encryption quality are you considering offering?
We're considering offering encryption so that people can get PCI compliance and HIPAA compliance. That's part of the larger goal is to help people get that with cloud offerings.
Have you looked into how other Heroku add-on companies do financially and their success and their exits and their path?
We did some of that. I don't know it offhand. I know that Heroku takes about 30%. I know the direct competitors, MongoHQ and MongoLab, are extremely happy. They blog about how much Heroku is giving them business and supporting their revenue models.
Okay, I wish I was there when you were trying to convince a bunch of people they should go down this route with you at the beginning of 54-hour weekend. So you did all the work that you just told Ottavio about in 54 hours, not before this. So you guys,
correct,
okay.
Yes.
And so I wanted to ask you, when you looked at Mongo, what portion of the market does it have? Are you just going to use that one because it's the simplest and it's the easiest? But do you know if that's 10% of what people are using in the database field, or?
In the database field, I think it's 20% in terms of startups in the database they pick. And the interesting thing is, actually, I read a blog post last night about a recent Mongo conference, and it shook. I always thought that Mongo is what startups always pick, but actually it's all these big companies like Microsoft, or it's not Microsoft, but large companies of that size that are sending their developers to learn about this database.
Okay, so in your mind, it's not the financial low-hanging fruit, it's the get or done low-hanging fruit. Mongo's the easiest to get this done first to validate the concept and put it out to the market. You had a room full of coders and developers, but did you go to any of them and ask them for a quote, a validation? Or did you just have an opportunity to go read blogs and the issues that people are having?
We found that developers that we've spoken with, they enjoy this. They typically say that they don't put in encryption when they don't have to because it adds an additional cost. It's difficult to do. But that if it were as easy to pick an encrypted version and use it as it were a non-encrypted, that they would go for the more secure option.
One question I have is, and this is typical of investors, and if you're pitching something that's more technical, like what you're pitching, I like to know who the people are that are behind it. Why are you the smart guys that are going to make this successful? So can you tell me in a few words sort of what your team is all about?
Sure. The team that I worked with a couple developers that I actually I work with in my company, Kashx Labs. We're a bunch of back-end guys, a couple, not all back-end. We're concerned with data security and data privacy, as well as being huge enthusiasts about helping open source projects. And I guess the philosophy that we follow is we believe in open source and we know everything's going to the cloud. We want to make it secure by design rather than as an afterthought.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.